Hello everyone, once again this is the Sliders Review, here to talk to you about sliders. And since it's October, Halloween month, I decided to give you some recommendations for spooky Halloweenish type episodes that revolve around sliders. Because as we all know, in the third season, a bunch of horror movie monsters started popping up in the show. That was around the time that Sliders was trying to do something a little different. They were trying to capitalize more on alternate Earths and the possibility of literally anything can happen. And it's around the time when Fox wanted more like action, horror, and like sex appeal in their shows. They fired the old showrunners and got a new one, and things kind of went weird in the third season. And I mean weird. There's still some good episodes in the third season, unlike the fifth season. But yeah, a lot of these episodes, I mean, some of them are still really cool. Other ones you can give a pass to. Other ones, if you were to take out the movie monster and focus more on the actual story of what caused this to happen, then it would have been a perfect episode. But nevertheless, let's get started. The first one on our list is probably the most Halloweenish type episode there is, and that's season 3 episode of The Dream Masters. Now this is a really cool episode. I really like this episode for the horror aspect. I haven't never really watched horror movies in the past. I started watching a couple in the late 90s, mostly slasher. And but I have watched a couple of more like supernatural type kind, like Final Destination. But I've just never really been into horror because I was younger growing up and I just really didn't like it. But I started getting into a little bit more as I got older. But like I said, mostly the slasher type aspect of it. But Dream Masters, I believe, is more like the whole 13 on Elm Street. It deals with a person invading your dreams and causing like all these hallucinations and really terrifying, horrific things to happen to you. And you believe that it's actually happening. And if you get hurt in your dream, you're hurt like in real life. And if you die in the dream, then you will die in real life. Now, the episode starts off with the Sliders talking about how they just came back from Mardi Gras, I think from like another world. And already you can start to see that the whole sex appeal aspect is taking place in this episode because Wade is wearing a dress, and a very short one at that. And that's something she normally never wears in Sliders in the other seasons, unless it was for like a special occasion, like a ball or something like that, or a banquet. Also, there's a female cop in this episode that's wearing some very short bike shorts, and her male counterpart, the male cop, is wearing pants. Also, when this one guy dies from being attacked by the Dream Masters, if you look at the right corner of the episode, you can see that the camera was panning on this woman's upskirt. Also, there's a doctor in this episode, and she looks professional, she sounds professional, she just doesn't dress like a doctor. She's wearing extremely tight pants, showing her midriff, a cut-off shirt, and it's just kind of like, I'm supposed to believe you're a doctor? And her entire staff is dressed like an actual doctor staff, but she's the only one dressed like that. So back to the episode. The Sliders are talking about Mardi Gras, and they almost get run over by a guy on a bike. He misses them, and then he hits somebody riding rollerblades. They get into an argument, and the guy gets scared because he sees that the guy on the bike who has red hair, which by the way, this dude's acting is great in this episode. I love it. I wish he was in more Sliders episodes. Anyway, he sees that he's a Dream Master. There are people who have a pentagram scarred on their hand, the palm of their hand. So he's begging, pleading for his life, and the guy touches his face with the hand that has the pentagram on there. Seconds later, the guy collapses and has a seizure, and he dies from that. The Sliders are in total shock and horror. They don't understand what happened. The cops are kind of like, okay, let's just wrap this up and leave. And the Sliders are very confused because they're kind of like, this dude died, why aren't you trying to do anything? And you should be talking to the person that, almost ran him over. Well, the redheaded guy takes an interest in Wade, and she rejects him, of course, because, he's a jerk. And so, like, the nerdy red guy, he shows her the pentagram, and she's just like, makes fun of him. And he's all like, oh, you don't know what this is? And then next thing you know, he's pretty much saying like, oh, I'll see you in your dreams and blah, 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 and stuff like that. And so later on in the episode, she's freaked out by what he said, but she goes to like a bar. And the guy is there, and he places his hand on her thigh. So after she leaves the bar, she has a dream. And she is running from God who knows what. And she thinks she's about to miss the slide. And so she tries to climb the gate that has barbed wire fencing on it. And she cuts herself. When the sliders see her in the parking lot, this is the actual real part, when they actually see her. So the dream is over. They see her, and she has blood like on her wrist and stuff and on her hands. So they try to clean it up. And the professor noted that, like, even though she's bleeding, there's not a single cut wound on her. She literally imagined that in her head, and it happened in real life. After that, they talk to a couple of locals, and they find out like what kind of world they're on. They're on a world where basically it's a cult of people that use these type of drugs to put you to sleep, and fear toxins that make you very like weary, and it makes you totally afraid of stuff, but only when you sleep. And then somehow, I don't know how, they're able to mentally, telepathically go inside your brain as you're sleeping and give you nightmares. That's the part right there I don't like. I like the fact that, they have a fear toxin. I like the fact that they have drugs that put you to sleep. That's very realistic and believable. The whole point where they're able to put their fingers on the temple of their heads and then go inside your brain is just a little too make-believe for me. Also, what else is make-believe is that the pentagram apparently has some type of magical powers. The guy took like a sugar cube, put it on the pentagram, and you see like this glowing purple light, and infused it with the drug that's in the pentagram. And it's kind of like, and then he gave it to Rembrandt, and Rembrandt drinks it in his coffee. That's kind of like, really? Like, you went like that far into make-believe? I mean, the whole show is make-believe, but you have to go the supernatural, magical route. That there pisses me off. And you can tell that John Rhys-Davies was not happy at all with this episode because he hated the third season. And in a lot of episodes in the third season, especially this one, you can tell he just was not happy. You can tell his heart just wasn't in it when he was giving his dialogue. And there was one time when he turned and looked at the camera after getting shot, and he just looks into the camera and just with the dumb expression on his face, kind of like, oh, why am I here? I don't want to be here. And he says his line, and it's just like you can tell his heart just wasn't in it. But anyways, a lot of this episode is kind of like the characters really don't act the way they normally do. We finally get to see Rembrandt starting to fall in love with Wade, and it was very subtle. Wade dresses in a way she never dresses before in this episode. She shows a lot of leg. Like when she was sleeping, she basically just slept in a shirt and some shorts. Now, yeah, people sleep like that, but Wade really doesn't sleep that way. She sleeps in a more like a shirt and like pajama pants type thing from like past seasons. And the shirt was somewhat like skimpy, revealing, and very short. And because it was that sex appeal type season. Quinn is very different in this episode because when he was talking to the doctor or the cop, no, he told the doctor, he's all like, well, how come nobody's eliminated these guys who like invade people's dreams? And the doctor tells him because they vowed to avenge a death. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, hold up. Quinn wants to murder these people? Like, when is he like the murderous type? I mean, he ain't like he's Batman's Ben Affleck. It's just like insane. And then I remember, like in this episode, when they're talking to the doctor, she explains, how they go inside people's head and give them the nightmares and the drugs they use. And her husband is one of the victims, and he did a lot of research. And in order to like counteract it and go inside their head, they need scrapings from the people's hand on the pentagram. And Quinn's all like, do we just cut off their hand? And Professor's all like, well, that's a thought. I'm thinking to myself, these two don't talk like that. These two like aren't like mutilators and murderers and stuff, but it's all a part of that whole dark, gritty action vibe the third season had. Anyway, so they go inside Wade's head, and they're fighting the Dream Masters, and it's a lot of cool like horror movie like type stuff, and it's kind of like, even though this is a kind of like a corny type episode, I like the idea. It's a bunch of nerds that like can't get women, so they get pissed and they decide to like get revenge by going inside their minds and giving them nightmares, and now the entire city is terrified of them. I also like the horror movie aspects they do. They actually show like a lot of blood. Like this feels like a actual horror movie, but with the TV budget of something like Goosebumps. And if they would have had like an actual real movie budget, then yeah, this would have been like a perfect like horror movie with the plot and everything like that. I just wish they would have explained better like how they went inside people's head. They could have used like technology like they do like in Star Trek, where they like put something on your head and then like they like go inside your head through like brainwave type crap or something like that. All right, the next episode is Paradise Lost, and this was in real life the episode where the guy who plays the professor found out that he was being fired from the show. They were all at the beach that night, or day, I don't know, day or night they was at the beach, and they were talking to like the production staff, and Sabrina was really upset because they were in talks of bringing in a new female character, which was the Maggie Beckett character. And she assumed, wait, I'm the only female of the show, so they might just get rid of me. And plus they were going for more of the like sexier vibe this season. And as we all know, Kari has implants at that point in time in her life. Really big boobs. And so she assumed, it was her. So, the guy who's the professor, he tried to like comfort her and everything like that. But then it was later revealed that, oops, it was him. So sadly, even though this is not the last episode to have him in it, it's like the episode before, because after this it was the Exodus, and that's when his character died. But on to this episode. This episode plays dear to my heart because I remember after Sliders had, went to Sci-Fi and went off the air for good, there was like no reruns really, except for on Sci-Fi itself. They didn't have it out on DVD at that time, and there was no such thing as streaming sites at that time. So the only way you could ever watch Sliders was just by the reruns on Sci-Fi. And I remember they would play 3 episodes a day. And I would like find like whatever VHS tape I could find and just record or whatever I had on there because I just wanted Sliders. And this was one of the episodes that I would record it. So it always has like dear and near to my heart. And it's a really cool episode. And it's a really freaky episode. Basically what happens is this. It starts off with a guy getting sucked into the ground by some kind of like giant sluggish type monster. Sliders come on that world. They're looking for work because they have to eat. This lady gives them a ride in town after she was almost attacked by this one guy. And the Sliders start to realize that the locals, even though they're happy that they're there, they don't really tell them anything. Like they're very like secretive. And we later find out why. On this earth, There is some type of giant slug monster. Yeah. Basically, a huge war happened a long time ago. There was a couple of nuclear bombs and stuff that went off, and it mutated a slug. One day, a guy named Parker was trying to kill the slug, and when he stabbed it a couple of times, he noticed that it secreted this type of ooze. Somehow, somebody, and they don't explain who or why, this person decides to eat it. And when they do, it makes them youthful again. It doesn't like transform them back into like when they was a child, nothing like that. It just keeps them the age that they are when they first started eating it. So a lot of these people in town are in their like mid 20s, something like that. Now, not everybody in this city or town, I should say, eats this stuff. Only a select few. Those that don't, they pretty much just try to keep away from everybody else because they know that they do or say the wrong thing, they're gonna become slug food pretty much because this monster has to eat to secrete this ooze and stuff. And these people don't really like to kill people in their own town because they live for like what is it now, like probably 50 100 something years past their date. And so what they do is they love outsiders because nobody is going to question the outsider that comes into their town, especially a bunch of people who slide from world to world. So basically, Parker falls in love with Wade. He wants her to be immortal like him. A lot of townspeople are very like mean, especially the sheriff. I'm not sure what movie this is based off of. It's a really interesting episode because basically you go through this whole episode wondering what happened. Like, why are these hick-like people being so mean? And the local townspeople, they're like scared to get like on the grass, on the sand, anything. They're always on the concrete. And Quinn thinks it's really weird that the kids are playing ball, like kickball on the actual concrete and not the actual grass. And when he goes to get the ball on the grass, you start to see something digging in the ground. So it's that cool, what is it type thing, type episode, And then you don't really find out the real answer until towards the end of the episode. And the guy, Parker, kidnaps Wade after she sees these people eating the purple ooze. And the way they eat it is like so gross and creepy. It's basically they use their fingers and they're just gobbling all up in the bowl. And it's all around their mouths. And they look in their fingers and it's just creepy. Also in this episode, the professor went to a bar to find out, what's going on with this city. And he talks to this one man who's missing an arm that's drunk. And the drunk man's all like, he lied about how he lost his arm. It didn't happen in the war. It happened because of the monster. And the professor's kind of like, well, you talking about the monster? And he's all like, look, man, whatever you do, just stay off the ground and like don't talk to none of the locals and just leave this town because it's dangerous. And then he runs off because the cop shows up. Well, they put him in this giant like beach area, and next thing you know, you start seeing these trembles on the ground, and then there's something like burning underneath, and the professor gets caught, and the thing takes him underground, and he's like, oh no, the professor just got ate by a monster. Anyways, they find Wade, they find Rembrandt, who's in jail, and they then later find out from Trudy what's been going on in this town. And she explains about the whole uranium mine and the war and stuff like that. So they go out to the beach, to the cave, to go find where this thing is so they can like blow it up. And as they're inside the cave, Quinn and Wade are in the cave, and Rembrandt is having a gunfight with the sheriff. Quinn finds out what's been going on because there are eggs all in the cave, and that's why the beast has been eating so much. Also Trudy told them that the professor might still be alive, and also that woman that Quinn saved earlier, because the beast will cocoon its food and then eat it later. Well, after they rescue her and the professor, they slide off their world. They also blow up the slug, and the slug eats the sheriff. Now, the slug CGI is terrible. It's that early mid 90s CGI, so I can excuse it for that. And also the show didn't have that much of a budget. But yeah, it's terrible looking. But it's still a really, really cool episode because it's freaky. The next episode is my all-time favorite, Soul Survivor. And it's one of those special episodes that I recorded on VHS years ago. Soul Survivor was actually like the first live-action zombie anything I've ever seen. The only time I ever seen zombie stuff was in that episode of The Simpsons, in the Halloween episode. And because, zombie TV shows really weren't a thing back then. There was no Walking Dead. I don't even think there was probably even like a Resident Evil video game back then. The only time you ever see zombie stuff would be in movies. And of course, that's just not what I did. And so this was like just a really, really cool episode. It was the first episode after the Exodus, after the professor died. So Wade's all upset. She's still mourning the professor's loss. Maggie is still like, oh, I have to kill Rickman, blah, 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 and nothing else matters. And her and Wade are constantly fighting in this episode. And one of the great things about this episode is that it really gave a good, character development between Wade and Maggie. Those two bickering, it really showed the emotional level that Sabrina could bring to this show that she had never really brought before because her character never really suffered a loss before. And Wade literally breaks down and cry in one episode, or in this episode. And it's just so sad. The only time we ever seen that really was in season 2 when they thought they got home and they actually didn't. And she was really upset that she would never get to see her family anymore. And I wish they would give more scenes like that to these characters because you gotta imagine, these people are probably never gonna get home. And what does that do on your mind psychologically, So anyways, they slide onto this planet and Quinn is attached to a cross. Because in the last world, they was gonna burn him alive at the stake. So Maggie and Wade are bickering over and over because Maggie thinks that Wade took her gun and hid it on the other world and didn't want to bring it with them. As they're walking through the streets, they get attacked by this man and Quinn gets bit. And they think they're on a world with cannibals and stuff. What they don't know is that they're on a world with zombies. So as they keep on walking, Quinn's leg starts to really irritate him. He's at the point where he just can't take it no more. So they see a light on an abandoned building because nobody is on the streets. Like, nobody. There are no lights at people's houses. And they don't understand why this is such a ghost town. So they make their way into the building and they see that there's weed everywhere. And they bring up Benish. Well, Quinn does. That was a nice little reference because, we don't get to see Benish no more because now they film in America and not Canada. And he's a Canadian actor, the actor who plays him. And so they are greeted by a woman with a gun barrel in their face. After a little exchange, she looks at Quinn's eyes and sees that they're glowing green. Yeah, the zombies here have green eyes that glow. And she said, y'all can stay here and we'll be safe, but he has to go and it's time to kill him. And they're like, no, we're strangers of this world, blah, blah, blah. And she's all like, it doesn't matter. Once you get bit, that is it. You turn into the undead and you stay that way. But she's the only person who's ever been bit and survived because she's immune somehow. Oh, also rest in peace to this actress because she has died in real life. She died last year in 2019. She was only 52. Her name is Stephanie Nisnik, and she died of liver cancer, or chronic liver disease, I should say. But anyways, after talking with her, they agreed that Quinn will help keep her generator up and running if she can take them into town the next morning and look for supplies so he can try to find some type of like scientific way to cure himself, because her generator is the only thing keeping her power on, because power in the entire planet is gone, or at least in that city. So the Sliders split up. It's Quinn and Maggie, of course. And it's, let's see, it's Deborah, which is the woman's name, Rembrandt, and Wade. So when Quinn and Maggie split up, they find a doctor, and this doctor has been bitten, and he is slowly turning into a zombie. The only reason why he's slowly turning into one is because he has kind of like a half cure. The other team goes and they look for supplies that can help them beat the disease or virus. Pretty much it's like this. It's explained that people on this earth wanted to lose weight. So they started to use this type of like enzyme that came from like bacteria. And these weight loss tablets they made the enzyme into. The enzyme later fed on their like bodies and basically turned them into the undead. Now, caffeine on this world is illegal. Supposedly caffeine tablets help them like lose weight and it was more natural and something like that. So they decided to go the nasty bacteria route. Basically this bacteria, when it turns you into a zombie, it makes your eyes glow green, your skin turn a little grayish, and it makes your tongue go numb so you can't talk. That's why you make the zombie noises. The only way to kill these things is to shoot them, stab them over and over, or beat them to death. Basically, it's just like killing a regular human. Also, they're very sensitive to light, which is why they only operate at night. And you can shine a light in their face. Basically, it's just any form of light. Now, it doesn't kill them like it does old school vampires, but it just makes the eyes hurt. Sadly, because this is on old school 90s network TV, there's no blood and there's no gore. Which really sucks because, you know, it's like when you think of zombies, you think of like Resident Evil, The Walking Dead, and you think of blood and guts, but none of this stuff. Once the team all meets back up, the doctor was able to use Deborah's antibodies inside her body for the cure. So he mixed a combination of the manufacturer's cure and Deborah's antibodies. So Quinn is all better now and the team's all happy, and next thing you know, Deborah gets kidnapped and goes underground. So the team goes to look for her. Maggie's all like, screw her, give me the timer and let's get on out of here. And Quinn and everybody else is like, we don't leave nobody behind. So they go underground with the rifles and they start shooting zombies and knocking them out. And next thing you know, Wade gets bit. But you know, the team's gonna make it. So after they defeat the zombies, they tell Deborah and the doctor, and hey, you know, come with us and slide to a new world. And they're all like, no, you know, we're just gonna save this one. Since they now have the cure, they can start curing everybody, because for the most part, everybody in California is infected. In the world, not sure. The next episode is one of my personal favorites. It's The Breeder. And I love The Breeder because there's a lot of like energy in this episode. It's very engaging. It took full advantage of the whole action sex appeal third season vibe. And I feel like if you're gonna do that, you have to do it right. And they did it right in this episode. But you know, once again, there's another doctor, another big booty doctor with long legs and a skirt. I've talked about this episode before, and I think I talked about Maggie, or the third season in general. Basically, it's like this. The Sliders are in a bog, and they're getting attacked by these jellyfish-like creatures. One gets on Maggie's face, an egg goes into her mouth, they slide, she starts to like have these type of seizures. The people on that world, they freeze her because they have cryogenic technology. And they take her to a lab. Now, on this world, basically, young people, like 18 to like 30 or so, have to sign up for organ transplants. Basically, if an older person or a rich person needs organ transplant, they're out of luck. It's kind of like the military draft back in the old days. While the doctor is explaining what's happening inside Maggie's body, Maggie escapes. They go looking for her. And as they're going looking for her, they start to see Maggie starting to act kind of different because it's the symbiote inside her body that is taking over. These little like lab police dudes, they come and they arrest the Sliders, but they only take Wade and Quinn because they're only in their 20s and the other ones are past 30. And then they implant these little risk detection things for their little donor project. I think this movie is based off Species, but it's kind of weird when this thing takes over your body. It turns your eyes like bug-like, and your tongue comes out, and it's like the symbiote's tongue, and it's like this big, long, nasty, gross-looking thing, which is weird because when the jellyfish thing got on Maggie, the symbiote didn't look like no jellyfish, but when it comes out your body, it looks like a weird, long, wormy-looking mutant thing. Basically, the purpose of the symbiote is just to reproduce. It just wants to constantly make babies and breed, which is why it's called the breeder. So when it's in a host, it can change like gender. So when it's in Maggie, it only looks for males to breed with. Well, Maggie's able to successfully mate with a man by sticking her long tongue thingy in like another man's mouth or throat. Once they bring him back to the lab, they determine that this symbiote does not like cold air. It only likes the heat and the warmth. So they freeze like the room and the little symbiote baby thing comes out. But they freeze it so much that the baby dies, and she also drops it. After having a debate with Wade, the doctor decides, you know what? Since you're of age and you know what I want to do, because the lady wants to sell the symbiote on the black market, she activates Wade's little alarm wrist thing. When Quinn and Rembrandt make it back to the lab, they discover that Wade has been, held captive by these people. And Quinn decides to manhandle the female doctor lady and say, oh, I'd hurt you right now. Which, once again, this does not sound like Quinn. Quinn does not do this, but this is the third season when he starts to go more of a darker, superhero-y type route. Basically, Doctor says she'll give you back Wade if you give her the symbiote. So Rembrandt and Quinn go to look for Maggie, and Wade does not go because she's now being held captive by the lab. Once again, Wade is now the damsel in distress. She has become the damsel in distress a lot in the third season, and I mean a lot, nearly in every episode. I swear to God, they did Sabrina wrong. While on their little journey of looking for Maggie, Quinn and Rembrandt have some nice third season character development, where Rembrandt is kind of like, Quinn, we came from the same world, even though he didn't know at the time that Quinn's from another world. But, we grew up totally different. Rembrandt sees what's happening on this world as oppression to young people. Quinn does not. He just sees it as a natural flow of, different worlds, different societies. This is a big wake-up call for Quinn, because while looking for Maggie, this really dwells on him to where he starts to see that he's acting a little insensitive and ignorant. So they make it back to the hotel because Rembrandt left the timer in the hotel when he was attacked by Maggie earlier. They go back and Maggie tricks them into where only Quinn and her are in the room. Rembrandt breaks the door down and he freezes Maggie. Basically, this symbiote is very strong. Like, it makes you super strong. It makes you leap from like tall buildings, and it makes you stick to walls. Kind of like Spider-Man. After they make it back to the lab with Maggie, they give Wade back, and then they try to like coax the symbiont out of Maggie by lowering the temperature of the room. But this is an adult symbiont and it's very smart and it doesn't want to leave. So Quinn decides, okay, I'm gonna go in there with a winter coat and I'm gonna try to, talk to the symbiont and try to make it come out. Wade and Rembrandt are kind of like, whoa, don't do this, man. Like, it's not worth it. It's too cold in that room. You can die. And not only that, but the symbiote can attack you. And Wade and Rembrandt off screen came to a decision saying that if it's them versus Maggie, leave Maggie behind and they will slide to another world. And Quinn is like, whoa, we don't do that. And they're all like, look, we have seniority right against her and we say this is what's going to happen. They manage to get the symbiote out, and when they do, the doctor is attacked. And then next thing you know, they have to slide. The other two are kind of like, yo, we gotta go and let's get Maggie. And Quinn's all like, no, we can't leave the doctor, she's infected. And the other ones are kind of like, there's nothing you can do for her. Screw her, she's not a nice person. And, we gotta slide. And basically it's him and Rembrandt having this long discussion back and forth where Rembrandt pretty much scolds him and tells him, you have to slide regardless and forget this woman. Quinn feels very guilty because Quinn feels very guilty about sliding and creating sliding technology because him and Wade had a little bit of a discussion earlier where Wade's all like, first sliding was fine, but now all she sees is death. And Quinn's all like, oh, well, I guess it's all my fault. And the professor, his death is my fault too. And so Quinn pretty much, and then the whole Rickman thing, it's just he feels guilty and his friends are kind of like dumping on him, making him feel worse. Well, they all slide and the doctor lady wakes up with the symbiote in her. And then she starts to see this man, what she's about to attack. And so now this entire planet is probably going to get infected with a symbiote. If they ever do a revival series, I hope they go back to all the planets they've had an impact on and see how they turned out. This would be a great follow-up episode. The next episode and last of the third season that really has to do with the halloweenish type episode is Stoker. Now, you might want to consider Murder Most Foul or The Slide Like an Egyptian. However, Murder Most Foul is more like a serial killer slasher type thing, where it's not that much of a slashery type thing. It's just the professor's brainwashed thinking he's kind of like Sherlock Holmes type character and they're looking for a serial killer and they're at a theme park. So it's kind of Halloweenish, kind of not. Slide Like an Egyptian. Even though there is a monster in that episode, it doesn't really consume the entire episode where there's a big threat. Basically, it's like they go on a world where it's like Egyptian style and Quinn is experimented on where they drain all his fluids out and he dies and then they revive him and then the sliders miss the slide because Quinn is dead and they think there's a chance that he might live, and then they're trapped inside like an Egyptian tomb or pyramid I should say, and there's a giant scarab beetle and it's chasing them and they pretty much just hide out in a room for the entire episode. And then they find out, oh, look, there's a new timer. And so, they all slide out of there. And it's just not really that Halloweenish, in my opinion. Now, Slither, I guess you can kind of consider that like a horror type episode. It's basically like Anaconda. Basically, they slide on a world where snakes are kind of like, they're not like giant mutant snakes. They're just snakes that are drawn to this one snake that's kind of like mutated, but it's just a regular snake, and the slides are constantly being pursued by snakes. So maybe I don't know. The Slider Paradise. It deals with a mad doctor who experiments on humans on an island, and he turns them into human-animal hybrids. And those hybrids are very aggressive, and they feel oppressed, and they hate humans, and you know, basically that's like the main story of it. It's based off the movie, and the guy who was in that movie, he actually played the doctor in this movie. Now, Stoker. I hate this episode. It's not really one of my favorites. It's a vampire episode. Now, I love vampires, but I don't know, it's just, this one's just, It mostly deals with a band. And also it has that nasty pervy guy who just now got Me Too. Anyways, basically it's like they're looking for Rickman, and they all slide to a planet. And so Wade, instead of looking for Rickman, she's more like she does her own thing. She goes off to clubs, and you know, she's partying all night long because she's still dealing with the professor's death. There they meet, or there she meets a vampire band, and it's the old school vampires, supernatural powers. They look at you and kind of like hypnotize you, and that's basically what it is. She's brainwashed, and they start giving her blood, what makes her even more brainwashed. So she's hanging out with the band, and the Sliders are looking for Rickman. Maggie's kind of like, you know, I'm gonna look for my way, and this and that. Then they start digging up graves, and that's basically what they do in this entire episode, because Rickman is presumed dead. He put an ad in the paper saying that he died, so that they will stop looking for him. Basically, this entire episode is just Wade falling in love with the head vampire guy, and Quinn's on his own little mission, hanging out with one of the dudes from Cheeks and Chong, and you know, hunting vampires down. Rembrandt is just basically like a no-show in this episode, and Maggie's on her own little mission of looking for Rickman and fighting with him and getting shot by him. And that's why it's really not really my favorite episodes, because it's kind of like they're all doing their own separate little thing, not coming together as a group, and it's basically just a brainwashed love story with all these supernatural powers, and I hate that about Sliders. Wade spills to the head vampire dude that, you know, she's not gonna stay in town that long because they have to slide. He's all like, slide? Somehow these vampires know about sliding technology, and they want to slide to another planet because they're tired of being hunted down. And I'm just like, how do they know about sliding technology? Because it's never explained. So basically, you know, they give the Sliders a message saying, you know, give us the timer and we'll give you Wade. So the three Sliders, they go with vampire hunting equipment looking for these vampires. And they start shooting a couple of them and this and that. And one of the vampire dude has the ability to, like, I don't know, it's weird. Like, when he was in the car with the one guy, he was like banging on like the car with his drumsticks, and it killed the guy somehow. And in this one, he has like a guitar, and he like strums it, and it's like electrical energy comes out and hit Rembrandt. And it's just like a weird episode that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. After that, Quinn and the head vampire dude, you know, they fight it out. The dude's on the motorcycle with Wade on there, and Quinn has a big long staff with a pointy end, and the dude's on the motorcycle, and of course, well, you know, the dude gets stabbed with the little staff, so he dies. And then Wade comes to her senses, and you know, she's all like, you know, she just wanted to have a little fun. And it's like, okay, that's great character development, her feeling so upset by the professor, and her not really want to be a part of the sliding team, and her doing her own thing. But it would have been nice to see that like progress throughout the entire season of her going through this downward spiral. We've only like have like brief incidents where she's upset, but that's about it in other episodes. The last Halloweenish episode ever comes in season 4. The Alternateville Horror. This is kind of like a spooky ghost-like episode where the Sliders slide to a different planet, and at first they get attacked by this acid rain. So they go into a hotel. The people in the hotel run out screaming, talking about there's a ghost. Throughout the entire episode, the only person that's there with the Sliders is the lady who runs the hotel. Then later on, this weird scientist guy comes there. This episode is really spooky, freaky, and just a lot of fun. It does the typical ghost tropes of, like objects moving in the air, things passing through walls. Maggie's head is in a thing of ice, and she's freaking out. Rembrandt gets a message on the mirror, and everybody's like, "Oh no, there's a ghost in the house." But Quinn's like, "There's no such thing as ghosts." And then next thing you know, weird stuff starts happening to him, and he's kind of like, "Whoa, man! Like, what's going on?" Now it's weird that Quinn doesn't believe in ghosts, seeing how, in the entire third season, there's always some type of spooky thing happening to them, monster-wise. And Quinn himself turned into like an invisible type person when he got struck by lightning when he slid in the second season. Now, of course, it's revealed through technology that these people are not ghosts. What it is that somehow when they slid, something happened and it turned this group of sliders invisible, because they're in between dimensions. And in this episode, Colin befriends a little ghost boy who's the son of the lady who runs the hotel. So with the power of lightning and Quinn's smart brain and technology, he's able to free these other sliders from this kind of like pocket dimension that they're trapped in. And it's funny because this other group of sliders are our sliders. It's Quinn, it's Maggie, and it's Rembrandt. That's basically it. And there's no Colin in this thing, there's no Professor or Wade, and they all have like these crazy different personalities. So Quinn saves the day, the sun rises, it stops raining, and that's basically the entire episode. And that is my picks for the Halloweenish type episodes and sliders that you can watch in October for Halloween month. These are really entertaining episodes, and for the most part, they kept really good to like the horror movie lore and didn't stray too far from it. Unlike the one episode where they had like a talking flame. I hate that episode. I think it's a stupid episode. I think it's a stupid little monster thingy. The only thing that's good about that episode is that America has the most oil in the world, and they could have done something with that, but they didn't.